Maya, don't unpack a single box until I get there. My mother's voice was unusually firm. I stood in the middle of my brand new living room, one hand holding the phone, the other resting on a cardboard box labeled kitchen. Sunlight spilled through the front windows, lighting up the empty hardwood floor I'd dreamed about for years. Why, I asked. There was a brief pause. Your brother needs somewhere to stay for a little while. I frowned. What does that have to do with my house? We'll explain when we get there. The call ended. I slowly looked around the room. The fresh paint, the unopened boxes, the keys still sitting on the kitchen counter. Somehow, before I'd even spent my first night in my own home, someone else had already decided what should happen inside it. 3 months earlier, none of this had seemed possible. My parents invited everyone over for Sunday dinner, saying they had exciting family news. I almost skipped it because I'd just finished another overnight shift at the hospital, but my mother insisted, "You'll want to be here," so I went. Dinner was almost over when my father reached under his chair and pulled out a thick white envelope. He slid it across the table toward my older brother. Jamal looked confused. "What's this?" "Open it," Dad said with a grin. Inside was a cashier's check. $80,000. For a second, nobody spoke. Then my sister-in-law gasped. "Oh my God." My mother wiped away tears before Jamal even said a word. "We know how hard you've been trying to buy a house," she said. "This should finally get your family into one." Everyone stood up. There were hugs, pictures, laughter. I smiled because it felt wrong not to. Then, after everyone sat back down, I quietly asked the question that had been sitting in my chest since the envelope appeared. "So?" I looked at my parents. "Does this mean you've decided to help both of us?" My mother's smile softened. "Oh, sweetheart." She reached over and patted my hand. "You'll figure it out." I waited for the rest of the sentence. It never came. Dad leaned back in his chair. "You've always been responsible." Mom nodded. "Jamal has 2 kids. He needs a little extra help." I looked at the check again. $80,000. Then I looked at my own hands. Hands that had worked nights, weekends, Thanksgiving, Christmas, every overtime shift I could find. I wasn't asking for 80,000. I was asking whether they'd ever planned to help me at all. Apparently they hadn't. The drive home felt strangely quiet, not because I was angry, because I finally understood the role I'd been given years ago. Whenever Jamal struggled, the family gathered around him. Whenever I struggled, people complimented how strong I was. Being independent had quietly become an excuse for never showing up. The next morning, my alarm went off at 5. Life didn't stop because my feelings were hurt. I pulled on my scrubs, grabbed a travel mug of coffee, and went to work. During my lunch break, my phone buzzed. Jamal. "Hey," he said after I answered. "You okay?" "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." I smiled to myself. "I will be." He hesitated. "I didn't know they were doing that." "I believe you. I would have told them to split it if I'd known." "You would have?" "Of course." I leaned back in my chair. "Then why didn't you say anything after they handed you the check?" The silence lasted just a little too long. "I don't know," he admitted quietly. "I guess I didn't want them to change their minds. It wasn't the answer I wanted, but it was honest." Over the next several weeks, my parents couldn't stop talking about Jamal's future house. Every phone call included another update. They found a beautiful neighborhood. The kids will love the backyard. The schools are amazing. Sometimes they forgot I was still on the call. I stopped mentioning houses altogether. Instead, every payday, I quietly transferred another amount into my savings account. One Friday afternoon, after finishing an exhausting shift, I noticed a small for sale sign outside a brick townhouse on a quiet street. I almost kept driving. Instead, I pulled over. The place wasn't impressive. The kitchen needed work. The guest room was tiny. The backyard barely fit 2 lawn chairs. But something about it felt peaceful. The real estate agent unlocked the front door and smiled. "Take your time." I wandered through each room alone. No one followed me. No one rushed me. Standing in the empty living room, I imagined where my books would go, where my couch would sit, where I'd drink coffee on Saturday mornings. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about what my parents had given someone else. I was thinking about what I could build for myself. That night, I opened the spreadsheet I'd updated every month for nearly 6 years. Savings, emergency fund, closing costs, monthly expenses, everything fit. Not comfortably, but honestly. 3 weeks later, my offer was accepted. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell Jamal. I wanted one achievement that belonged only to me. Closing day came on a bright Thursday morning. The attorney slid the final document across the table. I signed my name. He smiled. "Congratulations." As he handed me the keys, I realized something. Nobody had helped me get here. Nobody had written me a check. Nobody had called in a favor. Every square foot of that little townhouse existed because I had refused to quit on myself. An hour later, I unlocked my front door for the very first time. I carried in the first moving box, then the second. Just as I reached for the third, my phone rang. Mom. I answered with a smile, honestly expecting to hear the words I'd waited years to hear. I'm proud of you. Instead, she said, Maya, don't unpack a single box until I get there. I frowned. What are you talking about? We'll explain when we get there, she repeated before hanging up. I stood there staring at my phone. The excitement I'd been carrying all morning disappeared. 40 minutes later, 2 SUVs pulled into the driveway. My parents climbed out of the first one. The second belonged to Jamal. I smiled when I saw him. The smile disappeared the moment I noticed the moving trailer attached to the back. My stomach tightened. Jamal stepped out looking just as confused as I felt. What's going on? I asked. Before he could answer, Mom clapped her hands together. Perfect. Everyone's here. She walked toward my front porch like she owned the place. Dad and I have been talking, she said. We came up with a solution that helps everyone. I unlocked the front door, but I didn't move aside. What solution? Mom pointed toward the trailer. Jamal's family is going to stay here for a few months. I blinked. I'm sorry, what? They're still searching for the right house, Dad explained. There's no reason for this place to have empty bedrooms. I looked at Jamal. He looked back at me. Then he smiled awkwardly. I know it's asking a lot, but Mom said you'd already agreed. Everything inside me went still. I agreed? Mom waved her hand. Well, not officially. You've always been generous. You'll make it work. There it was again. Not a question, not a request. A decision, already made. I slowly looked past them. The trailer was packed with furniture. Boxes, bicycles, even a crib. They hadn't come to ask. They had come to move in. I turned back to my brother. When did they tell you this? He frowned. Last week. What exactly did they say? He hesitated. They said, you bought a bigger place because you wanted the kids around more. I stared at him. I never said that. His expression changed instantly. You didn't? No. He looked toward our parents. You told me she offered. Mom crossed her arms. We knew she'd say yes once everyone was here. Nobody spoke. For several long seconds, all you could hear was the wind moving through the trees. Finally, I asked quietly, did either of you think about asking me before making plans for my home? Dad sighed. Maya, don't make this complicated. It isn't complicated. I held up the keys. My name is the only one on these. Mom's smile disappeared. So you're really going to leave your own family stranded? I almost answered. Instead, I looked at Jamal. Did you sign a lease somewhere? He shook his head. No. Did you sell your apartment? Yes. My heart sank. He wasn't lying. He'd trusted them, and now he was standing in my driveway with his wife and children, believing he already had somewhere to live. I took a deep breath. Then I said the words nobody expected. Jamal, can I talk to you for a minute? We walked toward the sidewalk together. Far enough that our parents couldn't hear us. I need you to answer one question honestly. Okay. If Mom and Dad had never promised you my house, would you have shown up here today? He looked genuinely hurt. Never. I would have called first. I would have never put you in this position. For the first time all afternoon, I believed every word coming out of his mouth. He rubbed the back of his neck. I thought you wanted us here. I wanted to celebrate buying my first home. His shoulders dropped. Oh, that one word carried more regret than any apology. He turned toward the driveway and looked at our parents. They lied to both of us. I nodded. They just lied in different ways. We walked back together. Jamal didn't look at me. He looked at Mom. You told me she invited us. Mom opened her mouth. I assumed. No. He cut her off. You said she wanted us here. Silence. His wife slowly reached for his hand. Dad tried to step in. We're all family. Jamal shook his head. No, Dad. You put us in this situation. Then he walked to the trailer, climbed inside, and started closing the back door. Mom looked completely stunned. What are you doing? He didn't even turn around. I'm finding my own place, just like Maya did. Those words hit harder than shouting ever could. I unlocked my front door, carried one moving box inside, then another. Nobody tried to stop me. When I came back for the last box, my parents were standing alone beside their car. For once, they had no speech prepared. No advice, no excuses, just silence. About 3 weeks later, my phone rang. It was Jamal. We found a small rental, he said. It isn't fancy, But it's ours. I smiled. I'm happy for you. So am I. After a pause, he added, I spent my whole life thinking Mom and Dad were helping me. I didn't realize they were keeping me from standing on my own. Months later, he and I had dinner together more often than we ever had growing up. Not because our childhood suddenly made sense, but because, for the first time, neither of us was playing the role our parents had written for us. As for my parents, they eventually apologized, not because I demanded it, because they finally understood that believing one child is strong enough to figure it out doesn't make the favoritism hurt any less. The first home I ever bought wasn't the biggest on the block. It didn't have a grand entrance or a huge backyard. But every time I unlocked the front door, I remembered something far more valuable than $80,000. A house built with someone else's money can still belong to someone else's decisions. The little home I earned for myself came with something no one could ever give me, or take away. The right to decide who walked through my front door.